the thing is that up until this point, I thought everything was godlike. You know, characters godlike. Everyone you meet godlike. Animation godlike. Every time he like transforms into something new, it's so cool. Character development godlike. Everything godlike. You know, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Like I was that panel of judges at a Dunkathon just being like, it's a 10. It's a 10. That's my boy right there. 2 year trade. That's a 10. And then we meet Tanar. What's up, guys? Welcome to the Niisan podcast. I am one of your hosts, Xell and Crim, and with me, of course, is...
Hi, I'm Crim, also known as the Asian Avenger, and I'm excited to be here because we got a special episode this week with a show that I've very much so fallen in love with this past season. I'm sure some of you have too. And it's To Your Eternity. So, but before we get into that... Xell, anything we want to talk about? Any good news that might have come out this week if you're a fan of To Your Eternity?
Yeah. So the reason why this is all happening, by the way, is because To Your Eternity is on a 20 episode cycle, I guess, for this first season. So we are officially done. It is season 1 is over. Boo hoo hoo. It's over. Except the news came out that season 2 is coming right around the corner. I don't know exactly if they've released any sort of dates and stuff, but season 2 is fully confirmed. And I've heard manga readers say that they were pretty excited about season 2 in particular. So that's pretty exciting. And yeah, so if you're a To Your Eternity fan, good stuff.
To Your Eternity season 2 is going to be pretty sweet, I have to assume, because I mean, like we'll get into it, but like where this episode ended. But yeah. Let's go right into it. Let's talk about today because otherwise I think it's like a relatively slow week in news. So just hell yeah. Almost at 400 subscribers once again. I see we're still clawing our way there. We're making our way there. So just real quick, I just want to say thank you to everyone that's listening at home, watching, however you're enjoying this.
And yeah, as always, like, comment, subscribe, all that. We are reading and we appreciate all the people who engage with our stuff. But yeah, let's get into it. To Your Eternity. I guess we'll just start out with a general synopsis for people who don't know what To Your Eternity is. To Your Eternity is a really interesting anime, to put it at the least. This is going to sound weird, but essentially the story follows a being who drops I don't know, like he drops a stone, like a sentient stone, and the whole idea behind this thing is that when it is interacted with, it starts to learn and can take the shape of. And so you follow the stone and it becomes a person, it becomes many things throughout its journey in learning what the world is. And that thing eventually evolves to being our main character. And that sounds really weird and bizarre, but basically up until this point, it's been a bunch of, it's like almost like an anthology where it's like a bunch of short stories that with the journey of this thing. And we're going to call it Fushi because eventually that's the name that it takes. And so Fushi goes around meeting lots of different people, cultures, whatever. And it's... I don't know. I mean, I think that's pretty much what the synopsis is. And I know that's really vague, but that is literally it. And I think the hallmarks of the show is that it has this sort of dramatic storytelling. It's very drama heavy where like something bad happens to good people and it's about people and their struggles. And it's a deeply moving show, in my opinion. I have shed many a tear watching this. And so, yeah, I guess, Crim, any thoughts on that?
You know, I like exactly like what Xell had mentioned there. This show has definitely a way of hitting your, pulling on your heartstrings and whatnot. And the show is, like when I first read about like the synopsis on it, because I don't know anything about the manga. I didn't read the manga for this one. It just kind of looked like, wait, what is this? This seems kind of bland. Or like the concept or the synopsis was just so broad that it just didn't exactly have me like jumping out of my chair right away. But oddly enough, it was vague enough to where I wanted to see it just because like, what are they talking about? So, I think now as we kind of like talk about the show and because it's just wrapped its first season, like as the character Fushi goes along, it meets new people and as you're learning new people, as it meets new people, it learns new things. And that's kind of just like, as Josh had mentioned, just what it's all about, really. You kind of watch this little rock pebble, whatever, become kind of like human and learn emotions and just do more things. So there's... we're gonna call it by arcs, right? Like I would say for this, we can break it into a few arcs here.
Few arcs, and we'll talk about each and every one in more detail. But I think for people who haven't watched, let's give them a chance. So, what was your general thoughts? Now that season 1 is done, how do you feel about it?
I think this show towards the end had a little bit of a lull point, it wasn't like a lull point. Sorry, that sounds much worse than it actually was. Its worst episodes were still enjoyable, right? And because there's a part towards the end where just now it kind of felt like after how much it tugged at our heartstrings in the beginning, it like was able to make me cry, and bawl at just unbelievable amount of like bawling. There's a level of sadness I expect to hit at the end of every arc. And it's just like, why won't you make me even more sad? And that's for the most part, the show did a very good job. Like I would say about 90% of this season was just me crying. And so, which is good. It's really good. It's definitely a show, though. I know, like every week, I remember some weeks I'd be behind an episode because I just had to be in the mood. Because it's one of those shows where like you're not just gonna be like, oh hell yeah, let's start up Violet Evergarden, right? And or let's go watch Grave of the Fireflies for fun, right? Like you know what I mean? Like I have to get myself in a specific state of mind to prepare. And obviously, I think the show at the very beginning was one of those shows. But then towards the end, it got a little more lighthearted, right? It is like, okay, we've made you cry enough. But overall, still really enjoyable. What about you? I mean, like, I thought this show, just like, by the way, overall, very, very solid. Still feels like it does not have enough buzz around it when it deserves so much more.
Yeah, okay, so I think when it first started out, this show just wowed me from the get-go. I mean, episode 1 just hooked me in. I was into it, and every episode after, I was so deeply invested. It did with the last arc. That was definitely, I think, the stinker arc of the. But that's not to say that the other arcs are just that good.
Right.
They were just so amazing, and so it's unfortunate that it sort of drooped off at the end. But apparently, according to manga readers too, like that was the controversial arc. So it was interesting that they chose to end the season on that one. But I thought overall I liked it. The soundtrack is beautiful. I also just love the opening song with Hikaru Utada. And then I think aesthetically too, the show is a kind of a rare breed with fantasy shows and anime that isn't isekai. It's just a brand new world, and the world building is really what I think sets this show apart, because you just get to come across such a wide variety of characters and places and things, and that's what's kind of exciting about it, is like you follow the journey of this guy who is also figuring it out as he goes, and I think that's the part I really liked about it. And if I gave it an end rating, I would rate this a solid, like, I mean, at its best, it was like 10 out of 10. This last one was like, this last arc, in my opinion, was like a 7-ish maybe. Yeah. And so, like, if I was to give it a fair score at the end of it all, I think it'd be like an 8.5 or 9 out of 10. I thought it was like good, very, very good, with some flaws, but I loved the show.
Yeah, I think I for the most part, like, I don't know, this last episode pulled it back for me. Right from the previous one, I thought this last episode was beautiful, but yeah, like the show overall, I'd probably give it 8.5, about 9 if I were to give it a number rating. Forgot to put that on there. So, but yeah, like much like Josh had mentioned, the world building is absolutely wild, because it's apparent, right? Because there's multiple story arcs, and you kind of just get to see Fushi go through each character, or like every, I don't know, what do you want to call him, sidekick?
Yeah, I guess let's just start it, right? Let's just start talking about the arcs, because in the very beginning, it like, and for most of the season, it follows like a very specific formula where it's like Fushi encounters a person teaches him about the world, we get destroyed emotionally by that person. Fushi like learns about their form and moves on, because that's the thing, is like Fushi if he is emotionally impacted by something, feels pain from something, feels happy, sad, whatever, like he can become that thing. And so what's very interesting about this show is like he encounters people, they die, he is impacted by it, and he becomes those people, and he lives on through those people. And that's like very powerful symbolically, I think, throughout the show.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's talk about it. First episode, because the first episode is its own like sort of mini arc, and it's just so weird because you're like, I don't understand what is going on, but he essentially. The stone is dropped. He's a rock for 90% of for like a million years or something. He's just like he's just a rock for a long time.
They call him Dwayne.
He encounters. Huh?
They call him.
Oh yeah. We'll nickname him Dwayne Fushi. Before his name was Fushi, he was Dwayne the Rock, not Johnson. And he basically eventually becomes like this like dog/wolf thing, and this dog and wolf thing actually was best friends with this kid who lives out basically in the Arctic. He's like I don't know,
so
an
sad.
Inuit person, you know, and like he essentially the story is that he was the guy left behind because every one of his like tribe or whatever left to try to make it to a better place and then bring back supplies to the town. But basically, all that's left is this kid and his dog/wolf. Is it a dog? Is it a wolf?
I think it's a wolf. I think it's a wolf.
Okay, it's a wolf.
Right? It's a wolf.
And so right off the bat, it's just a gut punch because you're just like, oh, this is kid who's lonely, he's left behind, and this is his one friend, and then he has to make the decision to either stay there and potentially just die or try to make the trek out, and it doesn't go so well. Let's put it that way. So he goes out, he makes it really far. He's like, and the kid's such a sweetheart. He's like, very optimistic. He's a go-getter, and you want to cheer for him. And then he gets hurt, and then he has to crawl his way back, and you know, like he's suffering, and eventually he dies.
I think it's like internal. It's like internal bleeding or something,
or like
right?
an infection or something, and
like that was so much. I didn't expect him to die immediately, right? I was like, what? Okay. So, but like that was one of the more powerful like openers because the ending scene is just him sitting on his like rocking chair or whatever and just like hella dead. So and like at that point I'm like, wait, what just happened? I thought this was the main character. They just killed the main character.
That was the thing. I was like, I don't understand because in the trailers and stuff, you see the kid alive. right. He's not alive. And I was like, wait a second. What happened here?
I thought we were doing like the backwards storytelling after episode 1. Okay, well, this is where he is going to end up. But then we're going to show you his life before that. But then, this first episode right off the bat, it's just like, this is the main character. He's dead already. Or so I thought it was the main character. And he's got his adorable little wolf. And like, I don't know. It was a heartbreaker and it just ends like that. It just actually ends on the darkest note that it could. And then episode 2, you kind of see it like picks back up again. And it's like, okay, well now you see Fushi just kind of like learning and like wandering again, right? And wandering until he runs into, I believe next would be March, right? Yeah.
Well, so the interesting thing is that he becomes that white-haired kid.
Oh, yes.
I don't think we ever get his name, but he becomes that kid at the end of the episode, and that's when it was like, oh, the stuff that we saw in the trailer was not that kid. He's not the main character. He becomes him, and then he starts to travel. And like Crim said, he goes out on the journey that the main kid couldn't because, well, you find out that this being, Dwayne now Fushi, is immortal and he can die over and over again. And that's the thing is like, it's episode 2, he takes the shape of a human, but he knows nothing about what it means to be a human. And like,
he dies like a lot along the way.
Yeah, it's like ReZero where he just continually dies, but not out of like, not because of like interesting plot reasons. He's just dying because he doesn't know how to eat. And so he just starves to death over and over, or he like gets eaten by something over and over. And so like, he's totally helpless. He doesn't understand anything. And that was so cool because he's so alien like that.
Yeah, that really added to that. And like, I do wonder one thing though, because like you see this at the end of the first episode, right? Mm-hmm. how do you take that part where like the little boy, you don't get his name, the gray-haired boy, he dies, but it looks like he kind of like in a way Fushi like is like this vehicle to help him get to the afterlife, to help his soul rest.
Yeah.
Right? So like there's that scene. Like how do you see that scene right there?
I like to think of it as like this is because they use that motif a lot, right? Like when people die off, they become like a spirit and they become like, I don't know. It seems like they go to a happy place. Let's put it that way.
Right.
And I feel like that scene that we see is them moving on, but still being remembered by Fushi, in my opinion. And like that's kind of how I took it, but honestly, I'm not really sure.
Cause yeah, like I wasn't sure either. I was like, is it that these souls live on within Fushi? Like as in like
I think there's a little bit of that. I think there's like hints throughout the show that like him. Well, I don't know if it's like literally he carries them on, like his soul, their souls are like trapped inside his body or something. But there is like this, that would be dark. He's like Thresh from League of Legends and just has a bunch of souls in a lantern.
A lantern, yeah.
But no, it's like he gets to live on through them. And so their journey doesn't end with where they died. They continue on within Fushi. That's how I like to believe it. That's the happiest interpretation I think there is of that. So
I see, because like how I always saw it is that their soul kind of like not like are trapped, like it's in a cage. Please free me. But like I saw it more as the soul, and like these souls that they enter Fushi, and like their dreams, their goals, their aspirations, like in this moment kind of passes through Fushi, and he innately just understands it, right? Like it's just like he just picks up on it from these souls entering him. And maybe I'm looking into it way more than I probably should. And manga readers can correct me, but like yeah, like I just saw it that way. And so that's kind of like how Fushi slowly but surely becomes more and more human, and kind of like where he learns how to just like how to live and be, make goals, and like how to just try to like constantly go farther than he did the previous day. So
yeah.
like that's how I chose to see that. So like I don't think entirely. I think these souls kind of like somewhat still reside within Fushi in a way, like literally.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, that's how I chose to see it, but not in no miserable way where like, because they willingly are like, hey, I'm willing to offer, my soul up to you, right? Like, and stuff like that. So
gotcha.
But yeah, like then, so that happens, right? The gray hair boy dies, and they have this moment where the shiny yellow light, it looks like it's like the scene where he's like passing on, and it's like everything he ever wanted to do, could have ever done. It all kind of like flashes before his eyes and lives on within Fushi. Then you see Fushi go and just constantly die and die and die and die. And then I think Fushi dies and then doesn't respawn what looks to be like quite some time after, until the gray hair boy died. And that's when you run into the tribes of people, like with March and all of them. And March is this adorable little girl, so full cute. Of life. And like, she's like rambunctious. She's just like, she's got that natural youth, right? But she's like a part of this weird tribe. And for some odd reason, they got to sacrifice somebody.
Yeah.
They got to sacrifice, because I think it's got to be something about like appeasing the gods, and I forgot her name, the evil, like kind of like yandere hot ninja lady, the one. I don't know.
I forgot her name. It's not Perona. Perona is
the other one that has the like. Oh my God, she's the one that watches over March.
Yeah, I'm gonna Google this really quick. To Your Eternity, crazy lady.
Hot
sure
ninja lady. Just type hot ninja lady.
I'm not gonna sell it. Hayase.
Hayase. There it is. Hayase. Like she's this person that you don't know where she's come from at this point. She's just clearly from somewhere, and she's like, "Hey, I'm here to collect essentially your monthly child sacrifice." And March, like before you find out about this, March is just like, she's like, "I can't wait till I grow up." They do such a good job of building that, like, March up.
She's like playing with her little dolls, and then she's like, "Look, I'm your mommy. I'm gonna grow up and become the best mommy ever.
I'm gonna live forever, and then I'm gonna take care of my parents." Like all of that, right? And yeah, like that. they did such a, this is the charm in the show. They do such a good job. I feel like Fushi really is always never the main character. I saw him exactly how I would watch, like, you know, like the Mad Max movie. I thought Mad Max in like the fourth movie or whatever was not the main character. It was Furiosa, all that. But like, I feel like Fushi is just like the side character, and the main character is the new sidekick that they bring in each time. And so like they do a very good job throughout the show, not just here writing these characters, getting you to love them in very short amounts of time. And yeah, so like, yeah, like they show who March is, and then March has to be sacrificed. Her family isn't happy about it. Nobody wants it to happen. Of course, March escapes, and eventually, you know, a whole
Under the
battle
help of Perona.
From the help of Perona, who is like not her actual blood sister, but like,
But
just,
she kind of takes care of her like that.
right.
You know?
She's like just like her, pretty much her sister, but isn't by bloods. But yeah, so she essentially is not happy about it. No one's happy about it, and then, you know, of course, naturally, March breaks free, gets out of there, and, you know, they're on the run. Eventually, this ends in demise. And the demise of, well, March, who takes an arrow while holding her like toy doll, and then so begins the tears again after episode 1. I think at this point now I think she dies somewhere. I think like episode 3, right? I think March dies in like around episode 3,
episode 4, I think.
Yeah. So like they're.
I mean, God. I mean, it was just. The writing was on the wall, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it was just this horrible thing, because I love March so much, and she just didn't deserve that so much. And I think, again, like you said, the thing that this show is so good at is just makes you root for these characters who are so good, so pure and full of good, and they want to do well, and then to see it cut short due to some unfortunate circumstance where, like, yeah, I don't know, the tribe that she's from is not as civilized as like the, you know, crazy lady is from, and like crazy lady lives in basically like feudal Japan, and, you know, they have like whole markets, and it feels very not like modern, but like compared to the huts and villages that March come from, you know, that was a city, and where March, and so it's just too bad, because like, again, the haves and the have-nots, and she's a part of the have-nots, and so she must give her life, and it was just so heart-wrenching. And you see her too, she takes care of Fushi, who at this point only just learns how to eat, and and like start to understand humans even on like a emotional level now, and it's all because March is there, because she wants to be Fushi's mommy and teach him all these things and like how to eat. And so to see it all come down like this, and Fushi like helpless to understand what is actually happening around him, takes an arrow, and March takes an arrow, and to see it all crumble like that, it was really heart-wrenching. It
really was, like, especially after like they tricked her, like March and all of them, to go into the city. They tell them that, you know, that she's free now. Yeah, she doesn't have to deal with any of that Hayase, you know, hot ninja lady. Like the thing here is that part was like a really a gut punch, because I think one of the more memorable scenes is they're like, hey, if you could I want to send a letter to my parents at home. When she visits the city and she wants to send her parents a letter, and they're like, okay, well, what do you want to send her? What do you want to send them? And she wants to put her handprint, or she puts her handprint on this letter and hopes that it makes it home, to let them know.
She's like, what address do I send this to? She's like, I don't know.
I don't know. Make it happen. But yeah, the reason why she does that is it's like to tell her parents that she's alive and she's okay. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest heartbreaking thing. Like, you know, there's all of that, and they did such a good job of getting us to meet the first sidekick. And she kind of like, legitimately at this point, Fushi is just slamming his face on the table while he eats. He doesn't know how to eat, right? He just literally like slams his head down, hits the desk, and just starts eating with his mouth. And so like, yeah, like this is step one of watching who Fushi slowly, like kind of just become human, right? So after, you know, March unfortunately dies there, then there's Perona, right? Perona's the one that takes care of her. And like she and like, you know, Fushi are now captured, right? And they like, you know, they're trying to, like, they try to break her out. He breaks her out, and I guess at some point here though, Perona also much like March was met with demise. And
that comes in a little later though, right? So
I guess that's true. That might sequentially come in a little bit later, but
yeah, she doesn't exactly come to a happy ending either, considering like March underneath her gets murdered, and I think too, again, I think this show does such a good job of just getting such brilliant backgrounds behind the characters. Like the reason why Perona wants to save March so badly is because she too went through the whole sacrifice thing, and she was like, hell no, I don't like, she doesn't want anyone to ever go through this again. And so she's like doing her best to try to like convince all the villagers to stop doing this awful thing. And I mean, one of the good things that did come out of this was that Fushi learns how to become the giant bear that they worship as like the god of the mountains.
Right.
And so, like he gains that power. He gains the power, like literal power, to become this giant, enormous bear and actually start protecting people beyond just like his wolf powers now. That was pretty cool.
On the note of that, like giant, like mountain monster at the top, whatever, right? Like that, I think one thing that was really cool about that was the scene where you kind of just saw that even though that thing tried to kill them, like everybody understood that it was just trying to live and just do its thing, right? And you kind of just saw, like they were still very much so like loving and respectful, and they like paid respects to the creature. I think that was really interesting because like March is the one who first is like, because Perona wanted to behead or like take out the eye, or I forget exactly the details, but she wanted to bring back a piece of the bear to show people that like, hey, like the bear is dead, we don't need to sacrifice anything. And then March is like, no, like don't do that, like it's still a person. And while it was still alive too, like Fushi could sense that the bear was just in immense pain, and you could see it in the design of the bear too. Like he has all these like stakes and like what he's like always bloodied and has all these things sticking out of him, and you can tell that it's like been through a lot of battles and a lot of hurt. And so it was kind of like, I guess, poetic a little bit, seeing the sort of like care that March puts into everything that she encounters, yeah, and like that's what made it so hard to see March like die, right? Because like the thing here is she was so pure, she loved everything. Yes. And so, and after that, I mean, we can go into it a little bit more, but like Perona's end, unfortunately, was very, very brutal too. So it got dark. And this show kind of, this is why we were like, this is what we meant earlier when we started with this show, and we were talking about how it's always tugging at your heartstrings, because the first two arcs are very, very dark, and they don't lighten up for quite some time. And seeing Perona go, like later, we can talk about it, I guess, because I think that doesn't get revealed till like the third arc or fourth arc, actually the very final arc. So, we don't really know what happens at the end of Perona. Perona just gets captured, and so then we see probably one of the best character arcs, I think, for me. The next arc would be the next sidekick, and that would be Gugu.
Yeah, the Gugu arc.
The Gugu, for those that don't know, is going to be, he's like this it's super sad. Like, so he's this like lighthearted little boy, kind of just had a brother. His brother was pretty much like, let's be honest here, like pretty much terrible.
He's a scumbag.
He's a scumbag. He was gambling their money, everything that Gugu would work and save money, put it into this fund with his brother. His older brother would take it and just spend it and, gamble. Who knows, right? But the thing here is, so Gugu then eventually one day saves, he had this girl that he saw at the markets, right? And this blonde girl that he was just like in love with. But so the thing here is that comes back later, because Gugu sees her down by the river, and there's like a tumbling like log or something coming at her, and he like pushes her out of the way, and in pushing her out of the way, he completely just like mangles his face or something like that. We don't actually really get to see his face, but how I imagined it is like under that he just looked like Sableye, the Pokemon, and so because he had
Sableye's cute.
Sableye is cute, but if you're telling me that if like I had gems, like her eyeballs, like it would be intense, right? So he essentially was deemed this monster, but like he was this loving kid, and you kind of just got to follow him. And I think this might be the best arc because they really got to spend a lot more time with Gugu. Right. And you got to see, like, this is where you really got to see Fushi kind of become more human. You started finding about the knockers, which are like these random, like, they're like spaghetti monsters. They're like Eldrazi
they're like little
from Magic.
noodles. Yeah. They're like noodles wrapped around a rock.
Yeah. they look kind of gross.
Infect things. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, we get a little taste of that in the March arc as well, where he encounters it and he has to fend it off, and essentially it's hinted at because again there's this like specter who follows Fushi, and he's the one who created Fushi, and like he says that like the knockers, they're like the end game boss. We know that they're the end game boss, and he says like your creation is to stop whatever those guys are doing, and you know they're really the first time that you encounter something like truly magical other than Fushi, because every time that they fight, if they kill Fushi, they like take the memory of the form that they killed, and he loses them and their memory forever until he beats the knockers. And that becomes like a big thing because again, like we talked about earlier, there's a big understanding that like Fushi's memories and like these are the ways that he respects them and they get to live on through him. And so by taking that, you know, it's this tragic thing. And so in the Gugu arc, we get a little more of an idea of who the knockers are and stuff like that. And also, we actually didn't mention this, but actually before the Gugu arc too, and during the March arc, we also meet Pyorun, who's this who's this old lady who is very uncouth, I guess, to say the least. And you know, she's not like a refined old lady. She's down in the mud, like scraping. You know, like she's very funny.
I love her,
and she's always yelling at people, hitting people with her walking stick and stuff. And she's like this very spunky old lady. She has a criminal background, and you know, she's like pretty shady, honestly. But you could tell that she's got some good things about her too. And so, but by following her, that's how Fushi ends up because she goes back to her hometown in who knows where. Like we don't ever get a sense of the geography here, but they go back to Pyorun's place where she lives with this guy who makes
wine,
essentially just alcohol. Like a brewery essentially, and that's where he meets Gugu. Because okay, so to like talk about Gugu a little bit again, you know, again, this show is really good at this where you meet some person who is just so full of life and goodness and stuff, and just trouble after trouble comes. And I think that's probably definitely a strong theme throughout the show, is just like people who mean really well but don't actually have the power to like enact their dreams. You know, you see that with the white-haired kid in the beginning. He wanted to dream of that promised land essentially that he never got to go to. March, who wanted to grow up to become a thing that she never got to. And then we see Gugu. And so now with Gugu, yeah, he befalls that accident, but he does actually, funny enough, end up befriending this girl Reen, and Reen is like the most spoiled little brat ever. Yeah, and she is just kind of, when you first meet her, she's just rich. She like, so the first interaction that Reen has with Gugu, you know, she loses her dog again, and Gugu's the one that finds her, and she's like, oh, thanks you for finding the dog. Here's a ring, and the ring is like incredibly priceless and expensive, and she's just like very flippant with it because she has no understanding of like social society, and like, you know, she's just your typical spoiled rich kid sort of thing. But the thing is that she does end up actually becoming friends with Gugu, and this is where things is really interesting in the Gugu arc, is that the white-haired kid, now Fushi, who gets named Fushi by Gugu, they become friends, and Gugu really starts to humanize Fushi in a completely different way. And unlike the last arcs where it's just like, you know, one and done with the winter town, and sort of like a little bit in the March's village and whatever.
yeah.
He stays here for a long time. There's even a time skip. They're all older now, and Reen and Gugu are friends. Gugu still has this giant crush on Reen. He can't tell her what actually happened to him either, because as kids she was like, no, I had a terrible accident. I had a terrible accident and I have the scar, and it's so embarrassing. I can't show anyone. And she shows him, and it's this it's just like a little paper cut, a little scrape, and she's like, isn't it awful? And he's like,
dude, oh man, I would be so tilted. I'd just like,
but the thing is, like, Gugu's so good-hearted that he's like, he just tanks it, right? He's just like, that is awful. Don't worry about it. I'm so sorry that happened to you. And meanwhile, he's disfigured, and people like don't even treat him as human, right?
Yeah.
And he's like trying to do whatever jobs he can. And it's cool to see that he also encounters people of kindness, and that keeps him going. Because God, Gugu's hardships are just so heartbreaking because they're just completely out of his control, right? Like he's with his brother, and they were trying to gather up money to buy a mansion and to live good, but then the brother squanders it all and disappears, and he's just out of his life. And then and so now Gugu has to like make money on his own, and luckily he finds his family where the dad is super nice to him, takes him in, lets him work, and then he gets kicked out because the father's family is just a bunch of pricks essentially, and they're like, ew, like, this guy's a mutant, get away from me. And then he finally does find his place at this brewery, and he meets he calls him Sake Gigi, which it translates to like Sake Grandpa essentially. So anyways, they grow up, time skip happens. Gugu's now older and also ripped. He's jacked. He's Chad.
Like super buff.
Because he was like, because the whole thing was Gugu was like, I want to take charge of my life, and so he hit the gym, man. He lawyered up, hit the gym, and he's tan and he's strong. I guess like I'm trying to think exactly what happens, but essentially Reen has a birthday party, and at this point, like Gugu has taught Fushi a ton of things, like cooking, just speaking, writing. Like Fushi at this point, after the time skip, he's a person now. Like he up until this point, he was basically just a feral animal in human form, but now he can speak, and he's eloquent, and like Fushi, this is also a thing for Fushi, is that he finally understands like relationships with people and long term like family. Like these are some of the sort of things that he learns along the way. Yeah. And this is when it all comes crashing down, of course, because in To Your Eternity's fashion, nothing happy ever lasts forever. And basically at Reen's birthday party, where they invite everybody, the Knockers come back, and the Knockers are not here to play. They destroy like a part of the island that they're on, and like they attack, and that's when Gugu falls under a bunch of rubble saving Reen. And they have this one of the most heartbreaking moments where he finally reveals his face to Reen, and at this point you're like, no, you can't do it, because who knows what Reen will say, because like when they were kids, again, they like had that conversation where she was like covering her little scar, and he couldn't say what actually happened to him. But the final reveal happens, and she's like, no, I'm so happy, and I love you, and I'm so grateful to have met you, and I'm tearing up just thinking about that scene right now. And
it's real, dude. It's a real scene.
So tragic, and Gugu ends up biting the dust, and it was just this horrible moment, and like Fushi basically loses his brother because they
grew up, right? Because the time skip means that they definitely spent time together.
Yeah, and the thing too was Gugu always called Fushi his brother, and they were the monster brothers, and
I think, and so the one thing at that scene though that was pretty major is like whenever anybody around Fushi kind of dies, he can kind of sense that and just assume their form, right? So immediately afterwards, after the rubble and everything, like, you just see Gugu back, or like, I mean, you see Fushi turn into Gugu, and it's just like, you knew. This is gonna matter, because I think later on in the show, you're gonna just know when someone dies, because if Fushi can be that person, it's extra sad.
Yeah, and so that's when he realizes, of course, that Gugu had indeed passed on, and that was also a big moment where, Fushi kind of realizes that he can't stay there anymore, and he's not, as much as he wants to be human and to have a family and to have these long-term relationships, that's not who he is, and he must grow stronger. He must keep growing so that he can actually protect the people that he cares about, and yeah.
I think this is the big turning point, right? Tipping point for who Fushi is as a character.
Yes.
Because Fushi at this point has now just seen everything around him, everybody he loves dying. Right. Like, and so he, after a certain point, it's like, well, there's only one thing that's for sure. And it's me. Right. And I'm the reason why all these people are dying. Right. And so you kind of just like he just starts to question who he is. And so he has to and where he fits in this world, right? And just remember, he just barely learned how to become human. So he's still registering these emotions. He may have been alive for 5,000, 50,000 years, but he's maybe got the mentality of like a 2-year-old, right? So that was a big scene, because right then and after, that was when, Fushi splits off, and then Rin is just like, Rin never actually saw, right? Like, do we know if it's confirmed that Rin saw Gugu bite it? Because Gugu held it up so she could leave.
Yeah.
But then Fushi becomes Gugu, right? And then even though he talks to Rin as Gugu, Rin knew that wasn't Gugu.
So I think some people in that scene, they were like, does Rin know, or did, Fushi, essentially duped her into thinking that Gugu had to go buy cigarettes down by 7-Eleven.
7-Eleven of whatever world this is. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think the ending scene, because you see her and she's in that same bed of flowers that Gugu saved her at.
Yeah.
And she has a moment with her dad where she's like, I can't get married. Don't marry me off, because, there's just already someone I love, and he's gone now. And so
that part is so sad.
It's so sad because if you haven't watched the show yet, we haven't even touched on all the details that really make this arc in particular so beautiful. I think this arc on its own is just a masterpiece, and there's so many little details of Gugu's character of he's this kid who, again, he's met hardship after hardship, but he still has kindness in his heart and wants to do better for people. And, that's one of the things Rin notices about him. He gets her a purple flower because she knows that she likes purple, not green, even though her parents want her to like green. And, there are all these little small details that he's trying to be always a good person to people. And so, and then Rin and her growing up, trying to get away from her parents. And there's just so much that happens in this arc. And for Fushi, this is such a growing up moment where it's like he goes through puberty in those 4 years, because he becomes a person and he realizes he must take on responsibility with his powers, and the fact that these knockers do exist and that he must eventually deal with them and be able to protect people from them. And
he can't just.
I love this arc so much, man.
I mean, just. Every minor interaction between Rin and Gugu was just, it was so pure. You know what I mean? Watching also there's also this side narrative now. Of course, there's Gugu that you're focused on, but then there's the narrative of from the point of view of Fushi and who he is, and how he's slowly learning from each one of these people. And Gugu taught him what is essentially to be kind, right? To be, and to that to lose who your brother is, who you perceive to be your brother is oh man, that's got to mess up Fushi, who just doesn't know anything. Yeah. And so this arc, there's just so many things that happen at once. There's the growing of who Fushi is. There's just getting to know who Gugu was. And with how long Gugu had been around, I actually almost thought, hey, are we actually going to get to keep a character? I lied. You know what? I don't know why I said that. I should have never said that. And that was my fault for believing.
I remember tweeting out, like, if anything happens to Gugu, I'm killing everyone who ever heard Gugu and then myself. I do not care. I will protect Gugu no matter what. And then he dies.
Oh my God. That's exactly how I felt, though. It's like, you had to protect Gugu. He was so pure.
Yeah.
And this is just a reoccurring theme, as we had mentioned. Now, if you've noticed from like the last few arcs, there's always going to be good people, and the show does a great point of driving home that just because you're good, that's not enough, right?
Yeah.
That's just not enough, and it's kind of sad. It's heartbreaking, right? And then that's why, when this ends, and that final scene where Reen's like, you know what? There's a man that I don't marry me off, like Xell had mentioned. There's a man that there's somebody I already love, right? That was when I was like, oh God. I mean, how do you follow this up? Right? This was such a masterfully done arc, and this is like the main arc. I would say this is like the bread and butter of the show. This is the show was at its best. And then we go to the next arc after this.
Yeah.
And this is the next arc where, okay, this is not like, please don't think this arc is like, I don't think it was like bad by any means. I just thought, it's so hard to follow the Gugu arc. But this arc is the Murder Island arc, right?
Yeah, Prisoner Island, Australia, whatever.
Yeah,
like this, essentially, like Fushi and Pyoran end up leaving, the Sakijiji's place, and they strike out, and the hooded guy in the robot, I always call him an Asian, like in Final Fantasy 14.
Asian,
like,
yeah.
He's just like some, omnipotent, like cloaked guy who directs Fushi. And Fushi up until this point was like, screw you, Dad. I'm not going to listen to you. And then everybody he loves dies. And so he's like, okay, maybe I should have listened to him. And so now he listens to the guy. He heads out, and eventually they get duped on their way to a place. And they get shipped off into Prisoner Island, where they meet Tonari. This is the island of prisoners called Jananda. And yeah, I guess like this arc, how can you possibly follow up Gugu's arc? Yes, but also I think this arc was not my favorite for several reasons. And like, the thing is that up until this point, I thought everything was godlike. Characters, godlike. Everyone you meet, godlike. Animation, godlike. Every time he like transforms into something new, it's so cool. Character development, godlike. Everything, godlike. 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10. Yeah. Like I was that panel of judges at a Dunkathon just being like, it's a 10, it's a 10. That's my boy right there. To your trade, that's a 10. And then we meet Tonari, and I was like, okay, look, if To Your Eternity can make me care about Tonari by the end of this arc, it truly is the masterpiece that it deserves, because Tonari is like a little, she's so annoying. She's just like scrawny little girl from Jananda. She dupes them into going to prison, and she's just like, I'm trying to think of another character like her. She is just a conniving little brat, and she just like, she can't speak a shred of truth, and she's just out to profit off of other people's suffering. And you're like, wow, she is just the worst. She is so different than everyone's we've met so far, where everyone's so full of good and pure and whatever. And she is just, a scummy. She tricked people into becoming prisoners and being shipped off onto this island. And she's, never seems to tell anything truthful to Fushi. And like, Fushi's like struggling here. He's like, what the heck is wrong with these people? Up until this point, I felt like Fushi had always met like pretty good-hearted people. Like, Pyoran isn't exactly like the goodest of all good people, but like everyone had generally their heart in the good in a good place. And then comes Tonari and the Prisoner Island, where like murder is rampant. Everyone just can like kill each other because they felt like it. They're slaves. Like, this place sucks, man. This place is awful, and it's so. This transition was very jarring because it just kind of happens, and now they're in this new place. And I don't know, man. And the other thing that happened in this arc too that made me wonder a lot of things was that I thought the animation dropped so heavily in this arc in particular, and I don't understand what happened, but like there were some really choppy animation bits where people looked really stilted and awkward and weird, and it was just kind of jarring for me, considering that like everything up until this point felt so painstakingly like detailed and like beautiful and like cohesive, and then this arc, I just think that they didn't really succeed in making me want to like get around to liking Tonari, and so but yeah.
See, that's kind of like where I was originally. I was like, okay, well, how do you make me like Tonari? And I liked her friend group more, but this island, I think, was what we needed, though, because I think the reason why this arc felt necessary was that if you have noticed, everyone that before had died, right? Because they were the pure-hearted, all of that. But like, I felt like this arc was needed because it was a way to show you that you do need some grit, you do need some bite, and you need to like be able to fight, right? And you need
that's true.
And so that's why it was great that Tonari wasn't pure-hearted. Right, she had that, you know, that conniving vibe, you know, like, and she's from literally Murder Island, but at the same time, she did eventually kind of like they kind of met in the middle, right? She like I felt like she helped Fushi, you know, not be so helpless, and then also Fushi made her not be full on like I'm gonna kill anybody whenever I want, right? Like or lie and steal and all of that. So like it felt like they both needed each other, and this arc, in a weird way, it became Dawn of the Dead very quick. But like, like it felt like I see what they were trying to do. It seemed necessary for the progression of what Fushi was. I just think the execution wasn't great. This arc. I think I agree that this needed to happen. Something like this needed to happen. Just how they did it wasn't great. And
I think I could get along with that. Yeah, because like everything up until, like I said, up until this point, everyone's sort of good natured towards Fushi, and that's what he learns. But like for the first time in the show, he finally meets people who are evil, you know, like they're just bad people. And this is when we meet Crazy Lady version 2, right? And this is really the first time besides the Knockers where like somebody's really out to get Fushi, and I think that was again what you like you said, necessary. But I did not think the execution was good on this one at all. So I guess like let's walk through the arc a little bit, right? Because so they get shipped off onto Prisoner Island. Basically, Pioran is just sent into a tower, and she's like never seen again in the arc. She's just gone. And then Fushi is just like trying to save her, and Tonari's like, "What the heck are you doing, man? Just like stop doing that. Stop trying to like just accept that you're here, bro." And he's like, "No." And then he finds out that there's like a system that they have for determining who the leader of the island is, and essentially you have to win gladiator battles to become. And this is another part of the weirdness of this particular arc. Every other culture that he meets up until this point is like semi-believable, you know, like the Inuit kid who's just like stuck in the middle of nowhere, marches like, you know, human sacrifice things. Like all these things are like grounded in like what feels to be pretty realistic things. And then the Prisoner Island thing starts to get really wacky for me because I'm just like, oh, that's an interesting way to choose their leader, I guess. And I'll come back to this because there's a couple points on this that I'll talk about after the plot. But essentially, yeah, gladiator battles, and you know, Fushi, luckily for him, he can't die. So, you know, everyone's like, he just like walks through unscathed because you can't kill him. And so he's like poised to become the next leader of the island. And if you become appointed leader of the island, you get to do whatever you want, essentially, is the rule until the next tournament.
This is where he runs into Hayase again.
Yeah, Hayase
Right.
V2 Redux featuring Knuckles.
Yeah.
She is crazy style. So she somehow survives because the last we saw her, she gets mauled by bear version of Fushi, and you're like, oh, she's got to be Dunzo now. But she's back, and she's got these like crazy scars. Her hair is long and unkempt now, and she is as strong as she is crazy. Because then she fights Fushi, and she ends up beating him by.
Sleep
One,
darting him.
demoralizing the heck out of him, but also by poisoning him and making him fall asleep. And so, like,
It was here though. This is a big part because this was when you found out what happened to Perona.
yes. And during that fight, Fushi kind of realizes, like, oh, wait, I can transform into Perona? What the heck is happening here?
That was big.
Yeah, and then Crazy Lady comes in and she's like, oh, I see you can become Perona. Interesting. See, I was the one who killed Perona. And that's when Fushi is like, what is wrong with you, lady? And literally she is just insane. She is literally chaotic evil in the most purest form. She feels like she's just out to get him and spite him, and she like wants him to kill her or kill somebody. And, but at the same time, she wants
like in love.
in love with him and
Yeah.
like wants him to become like the god of the new world type of situation, and it's very confusing and like it doesn't feel very cohesive, and so really adds on to the fact that she's just crazy, and Fushid has no idea what to do with her because she's so beyond reason, and she keeps threatening the good of the livelihood of Tonari and her friends, and she's just crazy. And to make matters worse, the knockers come in, knocking in again, and like Crim said before, it turns everything into Dawn of the Dead, and now they have the ability to take over people's bodies, and they got the whole crazy tongue thing going on where they're all zombies, and there were some. This is probably visually like one of the grossest arcs too. Like, I normally eat food while watching the anime, and the way that they like insert themselves into people's bodies, it gets very Resident Evil-esque, honestly.
Yeah, it becomes Resident Evil, Dawn of the Dead. That it's definitely the way they enter your body, like it's like a spaghetti noodle, just like pierces your skin and then slides in, and it's just like. And like they take over people in their minds and stuff like that.
Do not slide into DMs like a knocker.
Yeah. Oh, good Lord. Yeah. Oh God.
And like the thing is, like, knockers, we see them in their like like habited form, and they're like a pile of spaghetti around like a heart, essentially.
Yeah.
And they like force that thick heart part into people's bodies, and it just like squelches in there, and it's gross, man. That was so gross. And
which also shows you Hayase and how wild she is. But like holy cow. Yeah, and like so these spaghetti monsters then start reanimating all the dead bodies from Murder Island. Mm-hmm. And this is where the next big calamity is, or whatever. They're trying to get off the island, right? So Fushi had already gotten everybody off the island, but then somehow they came back, like Tonari, all of them. They came back to like rescue Fushi, and in doing so, there's a little bit of a cross up here. Now, this is where Hayase, you see her kind of go more off the deep end, and she reveals a little more of who she is and why she's there. And I don't know what her game plan is, but like, God, I want to know more about her character. I'm very curious why she did what she did, why she followed Fushi for as long as she has, right? And we didn't really get a full description because we got a scene where she was kind of like lurking over his body and like being extra like pervy and stuff.
Yeah, she'd just be licking his face and stuff. It's kind of weird.
Right. And so but she said, well, she had a plan, right? There was something set in motion. So whatever all this is, we won't find out now. We're going to probably find out in season 2. So I can tell you that was Hayase is going to be a very interesting character. And the way this ends is, of course, with all the groups of friends or the group of friends around Tonari also biting the dust. But they're biting. It starts off in the saddest way possible. Of course, Upa. The youngest one of the friend group gets taken over by one of the spaghetti monsters. And like, this isn't to the level of March and all of that sad. It's just, it's kind of a bummer, right? So for me, the tugging at my heartstrings on this arc wasn't as bad. This was just, oh, that's a bummer. Damn it. No. Why? And then eventually, you know, like you find like not only her, but then like not Uro, but like Mia, and then the other dude, Uro or Guru, Uroi, yeah, Uroi. Those three end up biting the dust here, and when they bite the dust, that sends Tonari off the deep end. You know, she takes on the blame, but. And of course, those are the three last knockers left. This is where Fushi is presented with a dilemma. And this is why this arc, I think, needed to happen. Can he kill people? Like, he chose not to kill anybody in that whole gladiator tournament. Now we're at this part where, all right, these three are knockers. You may know them, you may recognize the face, but they're dead. Can you kill them? And he can't. And he couldn't for the longest time. Right? And then that's where Hayase offers the deal, hey, I'll kill them for you. And, you know, like, that's the whole struggle. And this is where we're starting to see the development of who Fushi is. And I believe, if I recall, that was when... Did Fushi end up killing them? Yes.
It's sort of... It's yes, like but, like, it's... kind of, I mean, technically he's not really killing them. He's killing the knockers that are inside them. Right.
But did he kill the knockers? Because it looked like he just left.
I think he did, because you see the bodies later and they're not inhabited by knockers. Yeah. So like, I think they end up, I think that resolves. Again, I think like even as we're explaining this, I'm like, man, this arc is just sort of a lot, you know, and like, things are kind of convoluted a little bit. Like, not only I think just the way the Prison Island arc is, of like how the prisoners conduct themselves is weird, but then also how Tonari's group ends up teaming up with Fushi in order to beat the, because that's the turning point in their relationship, right? Because like up until the first time the knockers attack, Fushi doesn't really like Tonari because she's weird, she's very self-interested, and everyone seems they're like out to use Fushi because his powers get revealed. And so, but it was at that point where Fushi has to fight off the initial knockers, and the group and the Prisoner Island people, they all come together to defeat the knockers. And so Fushi ends up being like, okay, well, you guys can help me somewhat, so help me do this thing. And then, yeah, the crazy lady comes in and she's like, I don't know. I honestly, like, thinking back to it, it's just sort of all over the place, man. And like they hit some interesting topics, like, who is Fushi when he's put up against the wall, right? Like, can you kill your the forms of your friends? Would you trade the lives of the living friends that you have to, you know, not have to kill the knockers? Are you willing to kill somebody who is like very evil and stuff? Because like at the end of all of this, right, because they do beat the knockers eventually, they do apprehend Hayase at the end too, and we see a scene that, like, everything ends. Tonari gets to stay with the Prisoner Island, and she like tries to help the people and such. And you see a scene where now he's rowed out into the middle of the ocean with Hayase, and she wakes up and she starts being all weird again. And she's like, I'm in love with you. Please kill me. I want to be you, you know, like I want you to become me. And basically he's like, no. He creates another rowboat and drifts away. And he's like, I will never see you again. I will not kill you. Even if you die, I will feel nothing. Because again, we know that the way he transforms into people is like through the pain of losing somebody. And he says that. He's like, even if you died, like I would feel nothing. And she goes. And then it ends on kind of a weird cliffhanger, because then a knocker comes into her boat and like
it's the
presumably
knocker.
Kills her.
Is this so I assume this was the same knocker that, like, you know, pretty much penetrated her arm and then tried to take over?
So I don't know, right? So this is the interesting thing, right? Like I don't know what you think, but my belief is that she's gonna come back as like human / knocker now.
Yeah,
I think because
it's gonna get Resident Evil up in here. Got it.
Because she had a semi conversation with a knocker. This was the interesting thing. Like in that same episode, a knocker tries to infect her essentially, and she has like a conversation with it. Like the thing never talks back to her, but she starts talking to it, and he's like, "Oh, you have the same goal that I do." Like,
it's like
what?
A mind link.
Yeah, and so it feels like they came to an understanding, and it leaves her and doesn't actually infect her, and then and so it comes back. So I think that we're gonna see Hayase version 3, and I'm not looking forward to whatever that's gonna be.
Hayase 3.0. She's gonna like. I like her. I know as a villain or a character. I don't know what she's gonna do, but I'm excited to see what becomes of her. Because I think that's the same knocker, because technically that one that tried to like infect her leaves her arm and just wanders off, right?
Yeah.
So it has to be the same one.
It could be the same one, and
but-
she could be dead, but like, yeah, I don't know. I think it'd be kind of interesting if she came back and the knockers could, like, you know, to Fushi, who is the sentient stone, what if they become sentient and they start learning how to be human, dude? Ooh.
Then we would have two like kind of like Fushi-esque things, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
And then eventually this will just become a mech battle anime, and then that's
yes, and we go into space, and they have to develop the drill that pierces the heavens.
Yep.
Yeah.
But like, so the one thing that one more closing thought on this final arc was that I think I had an issue with the fact that they spent all this time getting Tonari and the friends off the island. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, all the murdering and everything. Oh, never mind. We'll overlook that. We're going to run this island. I thought that was like kind of like, so the first like the 3 episodes we spent talking about the island and getting off the island was for nothing then.
Yeah, I don't know. They were just like, we'll just hang loose here.
Never mind, dude. I'll stay.
Yeah, no, there was again, the whole Prisoner Island thing didn't really make much sense to me. It felt like things happened just to drive the plot, right?
Right.
Like, oh yeah, Gladiator, and yeah, the winner becomes island leader, and we listen to him. Except when it's Tonari, and everyone wants to now kill Tonari, because Hayase wins the tournament, and she's like, no, I don't want to be leader. She can be leader. And then everyone's like, no, we're going to ride against that. And it's like, okay, but like you would have just gone along with whoever won like, I don't understand. And
yeah,
I just never really got to understand what that society was like. Unlike every other place where I felt like the rules were very cohesive and like made sense in their own like messed up way. Like this world really didn't make sense to me. And then not only that, I just felt like we never got to a point where I cared about any of these side characters, you know, like a couple of them got their own mini scenes. You know, Mia talked about how she wants to be a model, and like, and Tonari wants to be a writer and whatever. And like, I just felt like I never really got to understand them the way we got to understand some of the other characters like Pyoran and Gugu and Rin, and I just never felt like emotionally invested in these kids, and like they sort of made attempts to make you feel bad for them, like, oh, it was out of their hands. Like Tonari came because her dad was like a murderer, and she initially believed that it was wrongdoing, but then she realizes that her dad might not be as good as she wanted to believe. And then, you know, like, I don't know, it just, I never turned around with Tonari, and like I understood right off the get-go that she like had to do what she had to do because of the situation that she was in. Right. But also at the same time, I just didn't have that much sympathy for her in the end, and like I just never ended up liking her. And so like compared to all the other arcs, this arc, I just didn't feel the same emotional heaviness that the other arcs did. And I felt like, yeah, I don't know. This almost felt like a filler to me.
You know what it is? I think this, okay, right now, just from like from what we saw, if we take it at face value, yeah, I think it was problematic. But I think this Murder Island thing has to be some kind of setup, right, for something much later, because Tonari, there's no way they don't bring Tonari back, right? Like there's just no way they don't bring her back. And I kind
of hope not.
But like, okay, I mean, like, true. But what if she's better, right? Like cause like we just got
maybe.
Okay, so without spoiling anything too much, we'll go to the final episode, the episode that ends the season, which was a tearjerker for me.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, though, like, I feel like we've spoiled the entire arc many times over.
Right.
The whole season. But
we'll
yeah,
let's
talk about the last thing.
Go into the final episode here. So the one that we just watched, and I think, all right, so this episode now is going to follow Pyoran. and how what she's been doing. And you also see Fushi still taking it to heart that like, hey, everywhere I go, whoever I love or hang around or just be around dies. And so you see him follow Pyorin to the like a diner or a place where she sits down and eats dinner, and it's like, hold on, she was just like eating peas or whatever, and like it looked like she was struggling, right? And Fushi cares so much about Pyorin. And he went like, he's like, you know what? I'm just gonna leave, be out of her life so she could have a normal life, and be safe. Then as he gets on the boat, he realized, oh my God, but she's always cold at night, so I'm gonna go bring her a blanket. And then, oh my God, does she have money? Can I make her food so that she isn't starving? So it shows that he very much so still wants to protect Bjorn and be around her, right? And that's like. All right, you can already feel the heavy setting in, right? And then we move to the next part where now Pyorin and and Fushi meet up, and he's like, you know what? I'll stay with you essentially, but these are the house rules. Knockers come by, we leave. We don't argue, we don't do that. I go to bed after you. I wake up before you. And this was great. Like this was great. It was really beautiful because you got to see. As he talked to the spirit that kind of like watches over him or that created him, he's like, humans all die at some point, and it's just how they choose to go. And it was like, okay, well, clearly something's about to happen, because he's like, yeah, she's like about 90. How much longer do you think she has about to live? And that's what he was saying to her. And so that was when we realized that we started seeing, Pyorin's like mental, like kind of deteriorating. You could see it was like she was forgetting things. She was lashing out on Fushi. And this was really sad, right? Like it was really sad watching her mind kind of slip away from her, right? And this last episode really, once again, hit me in a spot that the first batch of episodes did and the first few arcs did. And I think the arc that we just gotten through with Tonari, I'm glad that's over, but it looks like we're back to where we are, or where we were in the quality and the way they write their characters. And the thing that was really important here for me was you got to see like essentially Fushi spend her moments with Pyorin in her final few days, final few hours, who knows what, right? And she sends him off to go get something because you could tell she's about to die. And she kind of like makes this prayer, this thing towards the spirit, the entity that kind of follows Fushi. And it was to whatever she needs to do, whatever has to happen. She wants to come back, be reborn as something useful to Fushi. This is big because now the spirit, the entity, makes himself visible and seen to, Pyorin. Does this mean now that this entity is death? And because then this made me wonder, if this is death, right? Does this mean that Fushi is, if created by death, is he actually a weapon to actually end? This is where I started wondering, like, is he the thing that kind of like helps, that kind of like makes life restart, kind of ends things to restart things? Because this is I'm very curious, and this is all theory and like theory crafting and stuff that I just kind of sat there and thought about. I don't know, manga readers might know more, but anyways, so Pyorin then comes passes on, and you see a younger Pyorin, and she's like just like full of like spunk, like you see who she was as like a younger person, and you see the entity kind of give her this egg, what looks to be an egg. And then every version of Pyorin gets like kind of like absorbed into that egg. And that's about the last we see from her. And then we see it end on, a time skip. And now there seems to be like, because like, I think Fushi's like what, maybe 10, 12? No later than like
his normal form was supposed to be 14.
Okay. So by now we're looking at what looks to be like somewhere in the mid 20s. Right?
Or because I think they
Could
said
be
it was
30s.
like 20 years later or something like that, they said. And so, so now he's in his 30s. Our age.
Yeah, he's our age now. So
Except he looks old.
Yeah, right. And we don't. So, but yes, that's where it ends. So now season 2, I don't know what's going to happen, but it looks like it's going to follow an older Fushi, and I'm excited. But
yeah.
I more so want to know what happened to Pyorin. Like that ending, watching her slowly slip away, yell at him, all of that, and then take this egg, meet the entity. This now has me very curious. What happens to Bjorn?
Her final wishes to this guy, this omnipotent guy, was that she wanted to be reborn into something that would be useful to Fushi. And so I think so the thing that also another motif that they always bring back is that when someone dies, passes on, you always see them at their like happiest, right? Like with the first kid, I think he finally discovers his long lost villagers that he grew up with. With March, it was like all her little toys that she grew up with and stuff like that. With Gugu, he gets to be with all his family and Reen and everything. And so you see them basically at their imagined happiest, I think. And you see that with Pioran too, because Pioran said like, damn, you should have seen me when I used to be hot and young and spry or whatever. And that's what you see is her at her youth. And I think what she was saying there was, rather than letting me pass on to the afterlife and to be, in heaven or whatever, let me be reborn. And I think that's what the significance of that egg scene was, because
then it's like the cycle, right?
Then so she gives up that chance to be happy in the afterlife, essentially, to be instead reborn, because that same egg thing is kind of looks a lot like what Fushi came out of, right? And so I wonder what the significance of that egg-shaped thing is. And but yeah, I don't know. I just I did like this last episode quite a bit, and I think it helps that Pioran was such a cool character. Yeah. And she's just like this scrappy old lady who does what she can to survive, but she's also very kind and like even if she's full of fire at the age of 90. And
I mean, she was still fishing, so
yeah. And I think for Fushi too, everyone he met until this point had a pretty unfortunate end, but in this case he got to see someone who ended their life sort of peacefully, and I think that's kind of important, right? Again, sending in that message.
Yeah, the entity kind of messaged that, right? Like only some of us are lucky enough to really choose when we go, right? Like really, like, and that's why that whole ending scene was so powerful, and like also seeing, like as you had mentioned, like she's giving up that happiness in the empty afterlife, right? Of being young and whatever, but to be like this reborn thing, what does she become? That's what I want to know. Is this is it all metaphorical? Is it just like, like a just symbolic thing, or does she actually get reborn? And I'm really excited, and I don't want to read ahead in the manga as much as I kind of want to also, but like, does she come back in the 20 years, like what, because we get a time skip, what does she come back as,
but yeah, going back again to the whole like scenes, because I think there was some pretty poetic stuff there with Fushi and his character development there too, because I felt like he doesn't really say much during that whole arc. It's a lot of it is just narration, and I think from my perspective that he sort of, even though he was told like everyone dies or whatever, I think he was still hanging on to the belief that like, they'll just go on adventuring, and like that's why he has all these rules and this thing, because he wants this to just keep going. And then like I think when she does pass, it like him crying like that, like was sort of realizing like, dude, you have to just move on. You have to just keep going, because this is the nature of things, man. And I felt like
I think that's
him crying there wasn't just like, oh, she passed on, but I think a lot of it was like him realizing that like that. Yeah, I don't know, that humans die. And like nothing here is forever, not like you.
Exactly. And that's been evident from like the whole first season, right? Nothing's forever. And I think that one scene too, that was so powerful, like for him to read back to himself, just like, hey, do what you want. Right? Like the do what you want part is like, that's right. Like, don't do what somebody tells you to do. Don't do it because like, some random deity, I don't know, some shadowy figure thinks that this is what you need to do. Live the life that you want to live, right? And I think that was a good scene for Fushi. I think he had to learn that, and that like he's so in the 20 episodes now, I feel like Fushi's learned a lot, and this was strong. I like that. So wrapping up, that's pretty much like about season 1, right? So some final closing thoughts, I guess. Let's once now we've discussed it. What's your favorite arc?
Oh, I mean, without a doubt, Gugu's arc was my favorite.
Still Gugu?
I think March is pretty close. I think March would be like my second favorite. I think both those two arcs were just, they were so beautiful. I loved both of them, and I cried so much at both of them.
Yeah.
They were both gut wrenching, dude. I
try not to think about it, but like, yeah. I'm gonna go with Gugu. I'm gonna go with Gugu again. Like, that has to be the best arc. That's like the primo arc. But at the same time, I don't know what's the future for the show and what's gonna happen. But I really hope we get a lot more, and I mean a lot more, of Piorin.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Oh, of Piorin.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I want more. I don't know how. And I mean, obviously, I want more from the show. It seems like there's going to be a lot because, right, the little like intermission scenes, it's like, you know, like Fushi with a bunch of faces. So far, we've only seen like 7 characters. So, and I have some one closing, I guess, thought, or I guess thing I was thinking about. I was like, does this show ever go to current time? You think it ever goes to, do you think that, would it be too wild if the show was like, you know what? And it ends in the years like 2021 or 2022.
Yeah, he's like fighting the foot wars in Vietnam later.
Yeah,
like
he's pretty much like Forrest Gump, but like deity form or something, right? Like, would that be outlandish?
I guess not, but yeah, we don't really know, right? Because like in it already in just the first season, we've covered a lot of ground in terms of like years, and like the one that makes me feel like we sort of know what time period is the Hanayome, or I forget what it's called. Hanayome? I forget. But like when they go to that city and it looks like feudal Japan, like that would have been like, I don't know, 1800s-ish. And so, I don't know, 20 years later, maybe we'll start getting into like the steam era.
Yeah.
And railroads and stuff. Like, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of curious. And I also want to know if they are going to start breaking up the sort of pattern that we've had so far, because like I felt like a lot of the stuff so far has just been like Fushi meets new character teaches Fushi about some sort of thing, and then they die, and then Fushi becomes them, and then we cry, and then we move on. You know. And I wonder if that will change, because in some ways I feel like this all serves to be a pretty significant prologue, because like he's learned a lot about what it means to be human in a lot of different ways, right? Like about people's lives and their mortality, but also about the nature of good and evil, and then about himself, about like the goals that he has as a being and like what he wants to do. Like, so I feel like a lot of the ground is now set for him to finally go off on an adventure where he gets to control his own destiny, and he has the power to do the things that he wants to do. And so like, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of curious where it ends up.
Yeah, same. I would love to. I'm curious, and I'm like at the same time I'm just like kind of wondering, like, do you think it ever ends in like a current year setting, you know, with cars and all of this? Because like, because they could totally do that, right? Like they could just easily go all the way to like 2040, and he's on a flying car, right? Like so.
And he was reborn into Kaoru from Evangelion. And that's how we close it all.
Honestly, that's the prequel we didn't know we needed. That's what all of this was.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah. So, all right. I mean, I'm excited to see season 2. Bring it on. I think it's supposed to, when is it starting up again? Season 2.
I'm not sure if they said anything about a date.
Fall 2022. Fall 2022.
Okay, so
next year.
2020. Next year, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, we've got a lot to look forward to. I'm really excited for this. So, this has been a really good show, and I hope that, you know, like if you're listening to this at home, give it a shot if you haven't yet. If you're listening to this, you probably, even if you've listened to us spoil things, it's not going to do it justice. You do need to watch it. You are not caught up. We are not doing it justice with our explanation. So, it's just that show. The show is just that good. So please check it out. And yeah, I guess any other closing thoughts on our way out, Xell?
No, I mean, again, I do like, despite whatever things I've said about, so my qualms with the Tonari arc, I think the show is very beautifully written throughout most of the arcs. And like, just because it had one sort of mediocre arc, that does not take away from the fact that it had straight up 10 out of 10 arcs within the show. So at the very least, please check those ones out because I think it's so good. And if you have already watched it, then you already know this show is amazing. And I was really happy to talk about it today. So
all right,
that's pretty much it.
All right, sweet. And let us know, by the way, for the listeners and the watchers at home, if there are any animes that you want us to do a full dive on, like dedicate a full episode to. We're always always interested in that, and maybe it's a series we haven't seen, and we'll watch it together, and you can see us enjoy it for the first time in our lives. So, other than that, I guess I'll take us home then. So, thanks very much for listening. As always, feel free to hit that like, subscribe, do the thingies, the engagement stuff. Hit the Bird app, follow us on the Bird app. We have a Twitter, we have all of that, and we also have one for the podcast too. So. Go do it. Go do the thing. Do the social media thing. Do the engagement thing. As always, we do appreciate every subscription, everybody, every follower, everybody that just watches our content, however you choose to enjoy it. So, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And I guess we're out. Peace.
Yep. See you guys next week. Bye.